The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to dispel the idea that this is a both sides do it problem and remind people that every Democratic presidential administration since Kennedy has left for their Republican successors a better deficit situation than they inherited, without exception. And every Republican administration has left for their Democratic successors a worse deficit situation than they inherited, without exception. And President Trump was on the way to fulfilling that trend before the pandemic. One of the reasons is that under Republicans, they don't pay for tax cuts, and so every time there's a tax cut, it just ruins the budget. And one thing I was here in 1993. Senator Conrad, you were here, and I think, Rob, you voted on the 93 budget. You just gotten here. It was contentious. It was down to the wire. Not a single Republican voted for it. And when it passed, it put us on a trajectory to not only balancing, but creating surpluses sufficient to paying off the national debt by 2008, putting all the money back in the trust funds by 2013. When they talk about the historic balanced budget agreements in the mid-90s, they ignore the fact that Gingrich, when he came in 95 as Speaker, shut the government down trying to dismantle the budget. And he couldn't do it because Clinton wouldn't budge. And the budget continued to succeed, went on a balance and a surplus. And if you wanted to know what the Republicans had in mind, we found out in 2001 when they had the trifecta, the House, Senate, and President, when you had massive tax cuts, 2 wars not paid for, tax cuts not paid for, prescriptive drug not paid for, and all of that budget projection of paying off the national debt evaporated. One of the reasons we had of the differential between Democrats and Republicans is unpaid for tax cuts. So I would ask Representative Womack if you would agree as a condition of starting the commission an agreement that we'd go to pay-go for tax cuts.
I believe in any mechanism that can be enforced without Congress deciding that we're not going to enforce it. And I think we can go back to pay-go and we can have a long conversation about whether pay-go was actually enforced.
Well, let me just say, reclaiming my time, under the Democrats, we pay for new spending and we pay for tax cuts. Under Republican rule, you pay for new spending, but you do not have to pay for tax cuts.
Well, I mean, I would agree that principally, if you're going to have any impact on the budget in a negative way, that you need to have a mechanism in place that either provides an offset that you will honor.
Well, I'm talking about starting a commission. I have no time left, so let me just pose some questions. If y'all want to answer them, fine, but I think they just ought to be posed anyway. The ranking member pointed out that the public, given the choice of taxing people over the present limit of $160,000 on Social Security, would rather do that than suffer benefit cuts. On a commission, one of the problems with the commission might be that dealing with short-term budget problems, how do you deal with long-term problems like climate change, investments we need to be making, how would they be? They would not be well reflected. And a concern that there's a difference between talking about doing something and actually doing something. The commission may give many people an opportunity to pretend that they're doing something and delay the inevitable. We have tough choices to make. We just need to make them. And with that, if anybody wants to comment, otherwise I'd yield back.
Sir, defer to you, Senator.
Very briefly, I'd say this to the congressman who I enjoyed working with very much back in the day. You know, it just strikes me that we've got an opportunity to take this on in a structure that gets both people at the table focusing on the issues. whether it's climate, whether it's revenue, whether it's spending, that you have an opportunity to be at the table to have these serious discussions. We all know the way the budget process works now, you really don't have that opportunity. You know, we're both locked into a partisan struggle that avoids the real tough discussions that we need to have. And will it work? I have no idea. The one thing I know for sure is that what's happening now is not working. And it strikes me that let's have an opportunity to try something else. Let's have an opportunity to try something different. That's what I'd say to the gentleman.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Scott, two points I want to make. This is going back to the Joint Select Committee on Budget Process Reform. We went into the process reform process recognizing that it was a process. It was designed to change the process. It was not based on developing some kind of outcome, i.e., what we're going to do at the end of this thing is going to create some outcome. What we wanted was to improve the process. And the process involved a number of things that are included in my testimony this morning. The other thing that we were able to put in this package was realizing that a balanced budget amendment is problematic for the Congress for a lot of reasons, that we installed a debt to GDP target, which we thought would be very important. Debt to GDP meaning that in these larger policy discussions, climate change et al., you look at those policies in terms of what is it going to do to the economic condition of the country if you do it or don't do it, and does it fit within the debt to GDP range so that we could start to encourage, you know, Mr. Yarmouth talked about how you either cut spending or you raise taxes. Well, actually, there is a third option out there. Grow your economy. And that's what happens when you have the larger policy discussion. So debt to GDP became our metric to use, and by the way, that was a Sheldon Whitehouse recommendation. So I think if we could get back to the inconvenient truths of where we stand and make our constituents subject matter experts, it makes it a lot easier for us to enact meaningful legislation.
Chairman, just briefly, and Bobby, we worked together closely when I was in the House and also in the Senate. I've always enjoyed working with you, and reflecting on your comments and Mr. Peters' comments, Mr. Panetta's comments, Mr. Trone's comments, this is about finding common ground. That's what we've lost, the art of the deal was talked about earlier. And if you have an objective that everybody agrees to, which you get out of a commission, you have to sign up to an objective. I mentioned earlier there needs to be some fiscal metric. That may be the hardest thing this commission has to do. Once you agree to that and everybody's on board, and this requires the leaders of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, to put the right people on this commission who actually want to get to an answer. Because it's too easy not to get to an answer around here and be benefited by it politically, whether it's the way the media treats you, because you can get on Meet the Press if you're, going to be out there rabble-rousing. You can raise more money online, the way the political system is working in terms of our primaries. We got to get back to a system where we're serving the people, and that means agreeing on that objective. I think the commission is a vehicle to do that. Kind of along the lines of what my friend Ken Conrad just said. It will require the serious discussion. It will force the Congress to deal with these issues rather than talking past each other, which is, in my experience, what's happened more and more over the past 30 years I've been in public service. So I sense you have an open mind, my friend. I hope you do, because I think this could be a catalyst.
I posed the question. I did want to make a quick comment about the balanced budget amendment. I think we ought to discuss whether that process would actually make it easier or harder to actually balance the budget. My view is the parameters of the balanced budget amendment would make it virtually impossible to ever get control of the budget. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. And from that exact point, I'll just highlight what Chairman Womack said. I mean, he focused on debt to GDP. Like, if we could make the focus on debt to GDP, we could actually have substantial ground that we could gain in this direction. If we make it, we even did. I mean, there are some in this committee that don't feel comfortable waiting for 10 years to get to a balanced budget. What we put the marker on, it's very difficult. 10 years, I mean, goodness, that's so far away for a lot of people. If we could get to a point where we were talking debt to GDP and putting those markers in place and establishing the guardrails so we could make that case, I think that's an addition to this piece. Using my newfound power as chair, I want to just make one quick comment to your first part. I have numerous times acknowledge that President Clinton was a key aspect, particularly with Mr. Panetta, a good friend, of finding a way to get to that balanced budget when a Democrat leads. But we cannot also dismiss the fact that oftentimes when there's a Democrat that takes the White House, what follows is a Republican Congress. And that friction also creates good outcomes for us to be able to make movements here. And so that happens in many, and when it moves the other way when there's a Republican. And so there's, to say that Republican presidents haven't cared about this, I don't think is fully accurate. And I'm willing to address it on both sides. The point I would like to quickly make, what we've gotten to the point where we've gotten in Congress is this once-in-a-generation type of legislating that happens when you have the trifecta. When you have the White House, House, and Senate in one party, we have this knee-jerk reaction to go big. And that's not ultimately the best 2030 long-term approach to legislating. So we, 2017 made big, I think the Tax Cut and Jobs Act did an exceptional job of growing the economy, but we didn't take much advantage of finding areas to reduce our spending. That's a criticism I have of our own party. And the 2021 experience that I had when the trifecta existed in the Democrat Party, we had a $1.9 trillion bill in ARPA with no offset spending that whether you blame it, inflation all on that, I don't. I said there's a lot of factors that contribute it, but I agree with Larry Summers when say this was a huge contributor to our inflation. So we get into these modes of we have to go big now because we have the trifecta. We got White House, House, and Senate, and we can bypass the filibuster, so we got to go big. Instead, this is we're trying to do the opposite here and make something 30 years out. I have 4 kids, 10 and under. That's all I care about. I care what they're going to be doing. If they're sending $1 of tax and 50 cents of it goes to paying the interest when they get their first job, I will have failed my job right now. And I don't want to fail this job. So I just like to add some context there that we have these moments in split government to actually make some progress here. So thank you. And with that, I appreciate the latitude that I gave myself, apparently.